Ready.
Go. Yeah.
Okay, let's go to our Lord in prayer if you wish to join us. Lord, thank you for the many blessings we received and the talents that we have that we may use through Rotary. Thank you for our Rotary leadership to guide us in doing great things around the world in our community. We thank you for all our blessings and raise these up to you to move forward in the Rotary way. Amen.
Amen.
So
Amen.
David, you want to do the pledge?
Okay, and I know it's disrespectful not to stand, but my laptop falls off if I stand. You'll join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America,
and
to
and to the republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excellent. Okay, so the meeting's officially open. I told you, Linda, about the email I got from the club runner to renew the.
It's taken care of.
Okay, I'm just following up. That's all.
Yes, thank you.
Just be careful. Linda,
Dues are paid.
Perfect. And you were going to tell us about the Challenge Air event in McKinney in March.
Right, it's going to be March 23rd at the McKinney Airport. Go to challengeair.com to register, and that's all I have right now, but it's the same format and everything.
I'm going to be in Bangkok then, but otherwise I would have gone. And let's see, is there any other business that needs to be discussed? I can't think of anything, but does anyone have anything that needs to be?
Well, although just an announcement at the last week's Mardi Gras fundraising for polio, they raised about $52,000, which will be double matched then by the Gates Foundation.
Oh, very nice. Very, very nice. Excellent. Okay.
And Pets is this weekend, and we bought the cowboy hat for the international president. We got that. So I'm going to Pets again.
Oh, right. You're the new president, so you're going to get trained.
This will be like my 14th
challenge.
year at Pets.
Do you have to go every time, even though you were president already?
No, we've been on the committees.
Oh, okay. See, that's what I meant. They're involved in everything.
When I was president the first time, I went to Pets in Orlando because I was working at the one here.
Oh, okay. I like San Diego, so that'd be fun. It's a nice city to visit. You can do a lot worse than going to San Diego.
Well, that's at international, yeah. After January, it'll be starting to 2020, the International Assembly will be in Orlando.
It's not terrible either. That's a nice,
I know,
they're both
I
nice
know.
places. Yeah. Now, I went to Van Wert, Ohio to speak, and I got out at 9 o'clock, and the nearest open restaurant was 65 miles away, and it was at McDonald's. There wasn't even a gas station with like a box of cereal. I didn't want to go 65 miles. I thought, I'd finish, I'd go get a burger or something, everything. So the cows were committing suicide. That's how bad it was. They had one thing there, the Trolley Car Museum. It was open on Sundays from 3 to 5 or by appointment, and that was their cultural highlight. So, it's not in Van Wert, Ohio, so we're ahead of the game there.
Well, we went to Portland, Oregon in January, and so Tillamook Creamery is 70 miles away, so we drive 70 miles to go get an ice cream.
Well, that makes sense, though. That's worth doing. A McDonald's burger at 9 o'clock at night for 60 miles of driving.
Oh.
I was starving. I couldn't find anything. I would have bought a box of cereal and put milk in it. That would have been fine.
Okay, let's get on with the meeting,
Get on
Howard.
with the meeting then. We'll go to Bob. I'm going to introduce Sergeant Major Bob Burton. I consider him a friend. Bob introduced me to the Green Berets. He's the person in charge of the accelerated learning there at the Fort Bragg, and he's doing a great job. These guys are amazing. I was very, very excited to meet them, and I think this will be a great program. So, Bob, you're on, and if you want to do any slides, you can. It's up to you. There's a share button on the bottom, or you could just talk, whatever works better for you.
Yeah, I'll just talk. I'm a little bit new to the Zoom piece. First, I want to be sensitive at time. How much time do we have? What's the cutoff?
Let's see. Right now it is 5:50. I'd say the cutoff is 6:30, but the speaker usually goes about 20 to 30 minutes.
Okay, well, I've definitely got a lot to discuss, as you know. Good evening. A little bit about me. Sergeant Major Bob Burton. I am Special Forces. The Green Beret is what I wear. I am not a Green Beret. I am a Special Forces senior enlisted soldier. That's just kind of a joke there, because again, it's a piece of headgear. What I do now in the Special Forces, I've risen up through the ranks from being a communicator on the team, is I work in capability analysis and integration. I tell I'm a future scout. It's my job to go into the future, understand the changing geopolitical environment, understand how emerging and disruptive technologies are changing that environment, how they equip our adversaries, and then how we can use them to enable our own joint force to dominate against the adversaries of our nation and our allies. So I want to start out with just a little bit from a statement from General Mark Milley. He's the U.S. Army Chief of Staff. He says, "We don't have the luxury of preparation when the nation calls to defend our national objectives. So readiness is priority number one." And if I may, I'm going to move into the National Defense Strategy, and I'll just hold that up real quick. As you know, there's two guiding documents for the U.S., for U.S. strategy. The National Security Strategy, published by the President, was published in late 2017, and in early 2018, the National Defense Strategy. So the National Security Strategy tells the Defense Department, hey, here's what I need you to focus on because the world is changing. And the world is changing rapidly. And I'm going to tie all this back to our necessity and need for accelerated learning, which brought me to meet Mr. Howard Berg. What a privilege, the world's fastest reader. Very cool. And then the National Defense Strategy, the SecDef tells the armed forces, to, hey, here's what I need you to focus on. And here's how he starts and opens the National Defense Strategy. Do pardon, I'm going to read just a little bit. I hope I don't read too fast. Please raise your hand or stop me if at any time you have questions. I've got a lot of material I would like to move through to kind of provide a very broad overview, and then to nest it and tie it right back what Howard did here at Fort Bragg at what I see as the impact in the future for our special operations, our Army, and our learning ability. And I will start out by saying our learning ability is our survivability. In the economy, in the civilian market, or in the commercial sector, learning potential is your earning potential. But in the military...
Let me interrupt a second. Howard, are you recording?
Yes.
It doesn't...
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Good to go?
Yes,
okay.
it's recording.
So over my right shoulder, what probably appears to be the left, it states, that's our soft promise. We have a promise to the nation as Army Special Operations Forces. That is, I will defend the nation, protect the nation without fear, without fail, without equal. And that takes readiness, leadership, technologies, all working together. And it's a whole of government approach that keeps our nation safe. So let me, if I may, I'll turn to the National Defense Strategy. It opens. The Department of Defense's enduring mission is to provide combat credible military forces needed to deter war and protect the security of our nation. Should deterrence fail, the joint force is prepared to win. Reinforcing America's traditional tools of diplomacy, the department provides military options to ensure the president and our diplomats negotiate from a position of strength. Obviously, war is our last effort. It seems to be, look at our recent history, seems to be a first effort, but I assure you there are numerous diplomatic efforts that maybe don't make the headlines that are keeping us from the brink of war in many cases. The SecDef goes on to say, today we are emerging from a period of strategic atrophy, aware that our competitive military advantage has been eroding. We are facing increased global disorder, characterized by decline in the long-standing rules-based international order, creating a security environment more complex and volatile than any we have experienced in recent memory. Interstate strategic competition, not terrorism, is now the primary concern in U.S. national security. And if you get a chance, you can go on and download that and just look at it. It's a great thing for, I think, every citizen to understand that the times are changing. And I just want to highlight some of that we need to change with them. In this discussion, I'll describe kind of a background paper I've written and the need for accelerated learning methods. I'll discuss how Howard came to Fort Bragg and worked with our Special Forces soldiers at the very beginning of their life cycle and training cycle. I'll then describe the making of a Special Forces soldier and some of their qualifications. and I'll highlight the necessity for new approaches to education and individual learning agility. What I believe is that ideas have potential, that when we release that potential, it creates power, it's energy, and it's a force that can change the world. And Pat and Howard, you definitely know that from being in the education business. The power that you are harnessing is tremendous. And the ability to release that same power, life-changing, world-changing power in people is an incredible gift. I consider it a superpower. The type of change that I'm looking for is to disrupt old thinking to create new opportunities for U.S. Army Special Operations Forces. I took Howard Berg's speed reading course about a year ago, and I'm reading at about 800 words per minute. I read complicated technical and strategic documents, as we just stated. I constantly use the skills that Howard taught at the seminar, such as how to ask yourself questions before, during, and after you read, how to build learning tables, how to construct mind maps, and summaries of your information. These are all commonplace tools that shouldn't sound foreign to any of us or the next generation. I constantly use these skills, and I take them and I ask these questions because I'm required to achieve results. If you want better results, ask better questions. That's one thing you learn in leadership training. If you want better results out of people, learn to ask questions. How might I help you to do this better? How might I, equip you better? How might I lead you better? And that builds transparency and trust in our formations. So Howard said that the question that we need to ask ourselves is to determine the material that we read. And what is the most important thing now? What is the most important thing I need to take from this material? So going into it, me and Howard have had numerous discussions on this, being deliberate about studying, what you're studying, when you're studying, and how you're studying determines severely your outcome. And if you're bored going into a study session, you won't learn much because you're not prepared to study. Your mind is not ready to study. And when we're teaching, I'm going to talk about these young soldiers who are the ones who are out there at harm's way, at the tip of the spear, against their adversaries of freedom in very complex, difficult, and VUCA, I'll break the acronym down, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environments. How do you make decisions rapidly? Critical decision making is absolutely essential. Howard does a drill where he asks you to look at, for everything, I'm going to ask you guys to do this drill quick, to look at everything in your room that's red. So just take about a second, look around your room, see everything that's red. Okay, go ahead and stop and close your eyes. Now recall everything in the room that's blue. You may now open your eyes. So I get it, it's not fair, but it shows us that when we're looking for specific answers, that guides and directs. And that was actually my breakthrough in Howard's system, is looking specifically to answer those questions when you're speed reading. And that's tremendous. So I moved through book after book. As a matter of fact, Howard, I talked about being a superpower. Did you hear that Bill Gates had said, if he had one superpower, that one superpower would be speed reading? I don't know if he's asked you, the world's fastest reader. I told myself, if I'm going to learn speed reading, I've tried some other folks, but I really want to learn this. I'm going to reach out to the world's fastest reader. And then, as Howard stated, he and I become friends, and it's just been tremendous things that we've been able to accomplish so far, and I see a lot more on the future, on the horizon. These critical adaptive questioning are essential for our young soldiers. To focus on the right pieces of information that are going to impact them and potentially and actually save their lives in a complex environment. As you know, and I will highlight it, that this younger generation struggles with focus, and they're distracted by their technology more than any other generation. I say that this is the most digitally and socially connected generation of all time, but did you know they are the most interpersonally isolated? So technology is both a good thing and a bad thing. And most of us, I dare say, are probably, not these digital natives. We weren't born into these technologies. We remember the old school before we were so adept and so required. So technology has kind of taken our younger generation captive, almost even hostage. If you look at some of the studies, the dopamine releases and all these things, I'm sure, Pat, you deal with that quite a bit with the families that you deal with. Put the device down. Yes, it's a tremendous tool, but I'll move on. So this trend, unfortunately, is on the rise. It's got serious implications on the nation's STEM programs. We talked about the president. The president's responsible for the sciences, the technologies, the engineering, and the mathematics. in the nation. That's our competitive advantage. Our competitive advantage to secure a position of power and influence in the future, it's our people. It's you. It's our people. That's our competitive advantage. We need an ability to unlock the potential of our people, thereby releasing the potential, which we stated was power, was energy of our nation. I've noticed this generation has trouble focusing on important tasks and information. The younger generation, they're the future of our nation. The future doctors, nurses, lawyers, political leaders, moms and dads, soldiers, professors, professional workforce, and even the future president is in this upcoming generation. My question is, are we preparing them for the bold new future that awaits them so that they can reach their potential? And if they can't reach their potential, we as a nation will not reach our potential. So this is a very, very serious question that we're asking here. If you would, I'm going to continue on. But I believe that Howard Berg's speed reading and accelerated learning program can change all that. So as leaders and educators, we're dedicated to helping people become their best so our organizations become their best. However, until we optimize our people through their knowledge, skills, and ability, we cannot achieve our potential as a soft enterprise. When I say soft, I'm stating special operations forces. So I'm actually quoting from a piece that I wrote to challenge leaders, to challenge our understanding of how we learn, how we study, and how we take new knowledge and ingest it. Because I'm sure you know this, you've hung around Howard for more than a day, that information is doubling every 6 months, soon to be faster. So fast that we need hybrid technologies and artificial intelligence and machine learning in order to process and make sense of all of this new information. So we need a super learning culture is what I've tried to drive with my senior leaders. Let me state just one point is even though I'm in capability development now, which are material solutions, what's the latest truck, what's the latest weapon, the latest, body armor for our soldiers. I did have the NCO Academy as I served as the commandant, meaning you're the dean of all professional military education for our NCO Corps. So I saw these learning challenges that this next generation is facing, the difficulties with focusing, and just their really difficulty with connecting with each other. Now, I have a phone on my screen. Is everyone else still there? Just checking.
Yes.
I can hear you, Bob. Yes.
Okay, I just had someone trying to call in.
Yeah, I muted my microphone so you'll get background noise.
Oh, I don't have a background. Sounds good. So today's hybrid adversaries are hyper-connected threats. They're operating in evolving environments, and it creates wicked problems that tangle our very minds and our resources. We need a new way of thinking. We need a culture of super learners who are able to maneuver the cognitive and human terrain to outsmart and outthink our adversaries to gain tactical positions of advantage that influence strategic effects. And I've nested and tied those effects from the national level through our strategy documents down to the tactical and operational level where I am. The greatest military capability that we possess, it's our people and our ability to innovate, create, develop, and design solutions to these complex problems. We are approaching a critical decision point where learning and education are more necessary than ever. And I know, Pat, you probably got your hands raised in the air and say, yes, finally, somebody gets it. And we get it in the military. It's how do we move forward? How do we break through this old thinking to create this learning revolution? As we talked about information doubling every 6 months, and you've seen the fake news epidemic. It causes confusion and deceit in our own mental processes and thinking. And if we're not conducting our own research through primary source data, asking the hard questions, we're going to believe the news. We're going to believe, I'm not saying you shouldn't believe the news, I'm saying double check. Be careful what you believe and don't believe everything. You've heard it said, if it's on the internet, it must be true. Well, technology offers tremendous capabilities, but it will never replace the human ability to conduct analysis and the awareness of the many biases that our thinking holds. You've heard the incredible power of the brain, that the mind can create new neural connections at the power of about 8 and about 10 pages of zeros. Those are all new connections. The brain is limitless. It's limitless. There have been studies that say we only use 10% of our brain. Stanford came back with an alarming study that says we use 2 to 5% of our brain. I will challenge that learning is survivability, and learning is your competitive advantage. Increase your learning, and all you got to do is a little bit more. I just heard a podcast from John Maxwell. He talked about how to be extraordinary. Do a little bit. What's the difference between extraordinary and ordinary? The word extra. Read an extra book. Get an extra skill, such as speed reading. Set yourself apart from your peers, from your competition as an organization, and you will thrive. It doesn't take much because of the degree of mediocrity that has seemed to kind of infiltrate our society. And it's time to rise above that. We rise above it first here in our thinking. So we talk about technology. In order to improve the outcomes, we must improve our sources of data. We talked about that. And decision-making based on the elements of thought and reasoning. There are universal intellectual standards and critical thinking standards from the Institute of Critical Thinking. And there's intellectual traits in order to maintain a consistent critical thinking process. And actually, I wrote an article about that, about critical thinking and special operations forces decision-making. We have to override our natural urges, desires, and compulsions in many cases. So I won't get into the article too much, but I want to state one point, that the amygdala is built into the brain, built into the limbic system as a survival mechanism. You've heard fight, flight, or freeze. Well, in special operations, you have to choose fight. The amygdala will choose what it thinks is best, unless you've inoculated yourself to the fear of a difficult situation, the fear, the pressure, the complexities of a combat environment, for example. And we do that through difficult and realistic training. Howard talks about state management. The importance of managing your state is essential to survival. It's essential to stress reduction and long-term health. All these things, the studies are out there. Just the data is overwhelming. So we must be able to manage our states. The demands of the operational continuum and spectrum of conflict, from peace through conflict to combat operations, require leaders to rapidly make sense of changing situations, to recognize the subtlety and the changes in the character of war. War has changed. The face of the economy is changing, and we have got to change our thinking along with that. So to meet these growing challenges, education must be a top priority for our Special Operations Forces enterprise. Einstein said, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. I'm sure you've heard that. And it's so true, but yet we seem to get stuck. Why? It's our thinking. Leaders must change their minds and perspectives on the importance of education. Only leaders can drive a cultural change to become super learners, to process the extreme cognitive demands of the operating environment. We incur risk enterprise-wide by not upgrading the firmware of our soft operators on a continual basis. One thing I talk to folks about is we develop the next weapon system and body armor and uniform and helmet and communications and all these things. But what we fail to do in many cases are upgrade the thinking ability. And I will say again, our thinking ability and learning ability is our survivability. To go in or not go in, to build your intuition, that gut sense and understanding of the environment. And that takes a very strong cognitive CPU. And we all have that ability. We just need to release it. This is interesting. We update our technology faster than we update our mental models or knowledge content. We have reminders to update our iPhone, right? Our Mac operating systems and Windows computers to continuously patch them against the threat, attacks, and vulnerabilities in the cyberspace. Leaders, we need to take the same approach with our soldiers and leaders with their people in the workplace. And let that be a reminder and example that lifelong learning excellence and firmware upgrades is essential, not just to competition, but really for survival. Learning is a personal endeavor, and real learning only happens when the person discovers new information that they can use to support decision-making and impact their life now. That talks to the andragogy and the pedagogy importance of learning and application. The adult learner needs to know how he can use something. So if you're in the teaching business, which actually all of us are, we all teach something. You got to tie it to what people can use in their day-to-day life and make it relevant. And that's one of the things that Howard teaches too is, how can I use this information? Ask that question as you're going through the information. Maybe it's just to pass a test. Maybe it's to change the world, to come up with the next Apple computer, the next iPhone, whatever that is, ask that question. The change to a super learner culture must be leader-driven and personally enforced to achieve and maximize our human cognitive and enterprise potential. Now, I have to ask, is your brain primed for the information millennium? Are you ready? Do you have the cognitive processing abilities to handle the multiple complexities that the world throws at us every day? So as you know, in the 21st century, information is king. There's more books and apps and courses and media being published than ever before. Information technology is expanding at breakneck speed, and along with it comes increasingly higher expectations for the ones steering the ship. That's us, right? The problem statement is, let me throw this out there. Here's the challenge. For most of us, school taught us what to learn and not how to learn. The result is our brain's raw processing power has been severely limited by what? Our beliefs. We're not thinking, right? We're not remembering and focusing anywhere near our real potential and anywhere near the requirements that the marketplace demands, that the business decisions demand, and that our making decisions against threats and adversaries in a combat environment demands. So learning how to learn, as you know, is meta learning. We need to take control of our own learning and meta learning. We need to think about learning. Learning should be, and I know Pat and Howard do, so my heart's right there with you. It's all about learning. And how do we do it better and faster and smarter to make people and release their potential? We must exercise our mind to create a mind shift. I don't know if you've seen the Barbara, I forget her last name, but she wrote has a Learning How to Learn MOOC, and that's on, you can find it on, I think, on Udemy, I believe it is. No, actually it's on,
Well, it's on course. Is it Coursera?
Sarah, thank you.
I think it's Coursera. Yeah, she's down at UCSD. It's in Diego.
Tremendous. Have you had a chance to meet her?
I haven't met her personally, but I interviewed her. We spoke on the phone for quite some time.
Great.
She's wonderful.
Absolutely. Just right up there with the work you're doing and the work that Howard's doing and just tremendous work. But she talks about mind shifts and learning how to learn. It's one thing I've discovered. I had to relearn how to learn. When I started my master's program, I wasn't doing so well. It had been 10 years since I finished my bachelor's studies. Matter of fact, Howard, that's what drove me to search, for a better way to learn, for a better way to read and to recall and study and memorize. And I started my searches like many, many people do. And that's probably how many of them stumble upon, your sites. They want to improve. That desire is there. John Boyd, I don't know if you remember him. He's one of the top pilots about the 60s time frame, and he was a flight instructor. He came up with a decision cycle with tight feedback loops called the OODA loop. It's observe, orient, decide, and act. I'm going to use the acronym here in just a minute. We must learn and optimize our ability to absorb, process, and use information to make decisions. If we use Boyd's OODA model, I'll explain that now, as a mental model for decision making, that helps us to match the velocity of change and complexity in the operating environment. The ability to O is to observe the battle space, the indicators, the warnings that help warfighters detect anomalies and irregularities to support decision making. O is the other O is the orient phase. So you first observe, then you orient to the environmental stimulus. It's the ability to make sense of and to classify the problems in the OE or operating environment. D, we then decide which action we're going to take based upon our previous knowledge and apply critical reasoning, inductive generalization from examination of particulars and being deductive, the identification of unknown drawn from known facts, right? So inductive or deductive reasoning to make the best decisions available. But you know what? The decisions we make are based on the information that's in our head. If we have no information in our head, we give our thinker or our decision maker very little to go on. But if we're reading books, getting ideas, we're putting lots of information. That's why you've heard it said, and we advocate this quite a bit, is that leaders are readers. You must read continuously because why? Ideas are released, and then you get those unique epiphanies, and you get those unique breakthroughs. And I continue to challenge those around me because I'm constantly thinking of new ways. And then I'm going to use another acronym called METTC. It talks about mission, enemy, terrain and weather, troops, and time available considerations. These are essential for orienting and deciding, making decisions in the battle space. So there's a lot of factors. That's the point I'm trying to make, is there's a lot of complexities when we make decisions. And oh, by the way, all of this has to happen at the speed of relevance, at the speed of operations. And the effects of the action, we have to consider what will they have. We have to observe them, usually through constant feedback loops, and that assists us in making future decisions. So if did I make a bad decision? Did things not go the way I wanted to? We need that feedback loop in our life and trusted people and trusted information that can help us to shift. And I won't talk too much about learning styles here, but learning styles are not the be-all, end-all. It helps you to adapt your preferred way of learning, but a multiple use of multiple modalities is the preference, and that's what they're trying to replicate in our schools. So Colin Powell said this: there are no secrets to success. It is the real result of preparation, hard work, and learning from failure. So if you will permit me, I'm going to continue and talk about Howard's time here with special operations. Does anyone have any questions so far about some of the challenging points that I brought up? Okay, nothing heard. So Howard came to Fort Bragg and partnered with our Special Operations Command. He came to help us prepare for and build the type of future that we want today. We build our future today. Tomorrow's results are based off of today's thinking. Where we are today, you are a result of all of your previous thinking. That's a pretty somber thought. Again, I use the speed reading techniques and accelerated learning techniques when I work with technology, doing research for academia. I'm still in my master's program, whether I'm writing information papers for commanders, taking volumes of information and condensing it through critical analysis and giving the boss, the commander, the general, what he needs to make decisions. This is interesting, is we need the ability to recall information. Thereby, we need the ability to store, categorize, and encode the information that goes into our head. And that's where many people struggle. They lack the encoding. We all have tremendous power in our brain. The information is there. Matter of fact, pretty much everything you've ever learned, smelled, seen, heard is in your brain, minus some of those areas that have been, the encapsulations have been pruned by your brain if you don't use those areas. That's why if you don't use it, you will lose it. And that is so true, not just with your muscles, but also with your thinking ability. It is the ability to have information available at your fingertips. We've become very, very lazy. Matter of fact, when was the last time we even had to think? Here's what I say. When Google became a verb, we were in trouble. So Google's been around since what? They believe the late 90s, right? Now Google it becomes the standard answer to everyone when you need a new piece of information. Why isn't it? Go get a book. Go check out an encyclopedia. Go read a dictionary. Go to the library. Go ask a person, right? Instead, we Google it. The problem is when we're on the forward edge of freedom in a foreign environment, in a foreign culture, in combat, in harm's way, we can't just Google it. We don't have internet. We don't have Google. We need our thinker to be primed with the information, the relevant information that we need to make successful decisions in the operating environment. I'm talking cultural decisions and cultural information about the many countries that we go to. The religious, the background, the history. I don't know how many discussions I've got in with local nationals and religious leaders and even military commanders, and they pride themselves on their history, really a lot more than Americans do. So the importance of being able to read through a book and collect and gather information, put it in Howard's learning table or in a mind map, and then commit it to memory, they are going to appreciate that, and you're going to break down cultural barriers and walls that otherwise would remain and hinder us from our mission. The ability to study a foreign language and then to converse with that, with that culture and that society and those people makes a tremendous difference. And I hope that folks have an opportunity to travel outside the nation and put those skills to work. But I challenge our foreign language programs and the necessity of that in our schools, that we need to do a little bit better job, because other nations, their kids have learned 3 to 4 to 5, upwards to potentially 7 and 9 foreign languages based off where they live. And I don't think we share quite those statistics. Ideas. Books have ideas. We talked about ideas being powerful. Martin Luther King had a dream. The Wright brothers had an idea, and they all made those a reality, right? And we take flights, and we talked about flying around the world and making huge impact, even taking kids up for flight. Where did that come from? It came from an idea. Yes, we went back to Leonardo da Vinci and his flying machine, his sketches in his notebook, but that dream has always been with us. And we've made it a reality. We took that idea, and that's the power of ideas. We can change the world. So I want to talk about continuous improvement just for a little bit. It's so essential to continuously improve, to think about thinking. And that's that meta learning, right? Then the metacognition is, how well do we learn? And I know Pat and Howard are very, very deeply rooted in this, because they've studied how this thing between our ears works. Most of us haven't, but I challenge us that we should. I'm going to keep moving because I know our time is running fast. Howard volunteered to speak to about 80 Special Forces soldiers just starting their training pipeline. How do we get after and change our force? How do we get after and meet the challenges put forth by the Secretary of Defense and the President? My perspective is we get left of their training cycle right at the very point when we select them. And then we give them these accelerated learning techniques. That way they can use these techniques throughout their career and their lives. Why? So they can build knowledge, understanding, and through application creates wisdom. New education opportunities are all around us for new innovative approaches that inspire personal growth, that ensure competitive advantage for the defense of our nation. And I talk about the poster and our promise, that will protect the nation without fear, without fail, without equal. If we don't continue to grow, I say that I believe our promise is threatened daily by our adversaries and by the amount of information we face. I'll say it again, our learning ability is our survivability. So let's talk about Special Forces training just a little bit. It's the most demanding training offered in the U.S. Army. From assessment and selection, where our young guys, and actually now our first female is going through the pipeline. So congratulations to her. She has been assessed through difficult emotional trials and physical trials, putting the body under great pressure to introduce people to themselves. Under pressure is when character is released, and we are looking for people of character. So we take those who pass, and then we teach them a military job, right? But again, we talked about the requirements and the pressures of the tactical and combat environment. We then simulate those in a training environment to inoculate you, to introduce you to yourself and how you're going to react in these circumstances. We develop your capacity and your strengths. Not everyone will qualify to be a medical sergeant who performs basic surgery and dental procedures and physical assessments to treat injuries and illnesses of U.S. partner nation and local U.S. Our forces, partner nation, and local civilians. Or an engineer who must master mathematical calculations to perform demolition missions, make calculations and draw blueprints to perform tactical construction projects, and advise on larger construction projects overseas. And I've helped with that to build schools and clinics to help impoverish communities in support of, again, our national and military objectives. Or the communications sergeant who will employ software-defined radios, both U.S. and foreign radios, cybersecurity, IT functions for the team, as well as tactical communications. The weapons sergeant must master all U.S. and foreign weapons and their employment, to include loading, firing, and engaging targets, clearing, reducing stoppage, and then making safe. We then take those and we train partner nations who maybe have got weapons, but they don't know how to use them. They've never had basic rifle marksmanship. We say that SOF are instructors by trade, warrior by necessity. And then I say that because it's our job is to partner with a foreign nation, a foreign entity, or that foreign military, even an indigenous force potentially in a resistance movement, and by, through, and with, produce and create regional and strategic effects by training and educating and teaching. Now, so everyone's a teacher in the military. Every leader is a teacher, and we need to step up to our responsibility. Our SOF requires memory skills, and learnability is survivability. The ability to recall information that was discovered during a patrol is essential. When you're scanning the environment for threats, you need to be able to file the information away for later recall. Learning should be fun. And Pat, and I know you, Howard, definitely take heart in this. And teachers, they've discovered that laughter and play are essential to memory and recall. We take the same kind of approach for our special operations soldiers. That learning should be fun. It should be collaborative. A game that we play, one of the games is the KIM game. It's called KIM, K-I-M, Keep It in Memory. We take the guys out. They go on about a 3 to 5 mile run or a ruck march, carrying their mission equipment and backpacks. We have them stop along the way, and they perform military tasks, whether it's a medical task or putting a radio into operation, doing some calculations, whatever that is, because even under stress, you must be able to perform your primary job and tasks. We then at each station, we ask them to memorize numbers, shapes, and faces. Then they have to recall them when they return. They can't write them down. They got to keep it in their brain. And then the drill, it builds neural pathways. It builds focus and filing and recall the information. And then they're graded on their ability to get as many as they can right. Name the faces you saw at Station 3. Station 3, I went to 8 stations. But Howard taught some of the techniques like pegging and taking those mental pictures in our brain. The brain thinks in pictures. It's so amazing. Once we discover that, we can now create stories and build and anchor and create mind palaces, as Howard talks about in his training, so that we can have this upgraded RAM or firmware in our memory. Let's transition to small unit tactical training. Our soldiers then move on and they conduct tactical training and field planning and execute many patrols and operations to test and bring all of their skills together. Sometimes without sleep or food, or with very little, they have to maintain their mental faculties to perform difficult and complicated missions. Integrating ground forces, air support assets such as helicopters and drones, and fire support assets launching artillery or rockets in support of ground tactical operations. All at the same time. This all happens so fast, and the brain is overwhelmed if it's not prepared for these complications. So we do that in a training environment to inoculate them from being overwhelmed in a high-paced, high-performance environment. The ability to learn the parts of the mission order, the call signs, the frequencies, call for fire missions, medevac 9 line if someone gets injured, calling in the helicopters, where the phase lines are, what the decision points are, what the objective locations are, where the adversary, the enemy forces are located, the blood type of the guy next to you, how much food, water, and batteries do you have left. And we have to perform these, and each one of our military jobs that we've been trained to perform all at the same time. We put a tremendous amount of pressure onto our young folks and our senior folks who have learned all of these techniques. There will be ambiguity and complexity in the training to test judgment and critical and creative thinking, to include memory, recall, and adaptation to the local environment. What Howard provided was a state management methods to help the guys calm their nerves and to recall life-saving information when and wherever they need it. And Howard, I know you remember that because you had a great ball and a lot of fun doing that. So I appreciate that. We put them also into unconventional scenarios where there is no right answer. You have to make your best analysis. We discussed the OODA process, the OODA loop from John Boyd that he gave us, of observe, orient, decide, and act. The information you have in your head is going to help you make sense when you orient and you observe, and the environment is changing at a very rapid pace. We have to transition, however, to where we build models and hypothesize what we think is the best way to go. And then we test that hypothesis before we put it into action. And that's where I think a lot of academia is going. And I'm actually working, Howard, this is interesting, we can talk some more about it too, is the hacking for defense. And when people hear hacking for defense, it's a DoD and collaborative integration with academia. They think computer hacking. It's not computer hacking. It's hacking of ideas, right? To meet this next generation and collaborative domains in their academic institutions. Started at Stanford, and I'm going to assist as a mentor here at the North Carolina NC State University, or NC State. It's spread out to about 24 universities across the U.S. There's international students in there, from everything from engineering to medical to business development. And what they use, which is a neat philosophy if you haven't heard of it, is the lean startup methodology for businesses. And it takes the collaborative power and the new thinking. It's the ideas. That's why I love it. We can get ingrained in our military thinking and our doctrine and how we've always done things. So we are just as susceptible to everyone else in society to get anchored on our old thinking. But I've discussed briefly about some of the complexities that challenge us as we move forward, and the need for new thinking models. So that's where that new thinking comes in. And I'm going to go up to NC State tomorrow and meet with some of the students and give them a presentation about the program, and really just shake their hand and thank them for working on our military problems. That's what they do. They get academic credit for working on military problems. And that helps us to fulfill our promise that we will protect the nation without fear, without fail, and without equal. So let me continue on. We then move our guys into language training. Every one of our special forces, civil affairs, and psychological operations soldiers, they're required to learn a second language. And we talked about some of the challenges of that already. They're going to use this foreign language when working with partner nations in combat to give patrol orders, or with indigenous personnel who have no military training whatsoever. And you need those language skills to communicate. Think about that. Foreign language skills are used to talk to local political leaders, military leaders, soldiers, civilians, medical and religious leaders to determine how the U.S. can meet their needs in order to further national security objectives in that area, right? And also so that we can use it to seek information about enemy activities in the area of operation. Howard, again, provided these memory techniques to help our guys with studying foreign languages. Talks a lot about the flashcards, association, pegging to build a deeper understanding of the language, and repetition, repetition, repetition. Pat, I know you'll say the same thing, is key to learning. 1, state management. 2, repetition, and then actually 2 would probably be understanding how you're going to apply this information. What does it mean? What's the so what? How can I use this new knowledge? And then repetition, and then testing, and then, of course, memory recall. You have to refresh what you've already learned. If you don't use it, you will lose it. And I talked about learning ability is survivability. I'll continue. On graduation, the real test begins. Now our guys must take their baseline information that they've learned, how they deploy to a foreign environment in support of national security objectives. In support of a whole-of-government approach of diplomacy, information, military, and economic, these make up the elements of national power. SOF are often the only U.S. forces present in the environment. And we also serve as ambassadors to the U.S., what they see of us and how we've made an impact, learning the culture, the environmental considerations, their history, their religious factors, all these things, do's and don'ts, the taboos, make a significant impact. And I represent you. My folks who are out there in harm's way at the forward edge of freedom represent you as Americans, and they represent us. So we've got to get it right. We're the only ones there in many cases. This creates credibility and trust that we work with. It's all made possible by our ability to learn and recall and put into action what we have learned. Remember, putting it into action, that creates power, that creates that energy that we're looking for to make a change and a difference in the world. Now let's talk about motor skills just a little bit. The many motor skills are, we say muscle memory. Your muscle doesn't have any memory. Your brain has memory in the form of neural pathways and myelin sheaths coat and protect those and increase the speed to make instantaneous actions a reaction. And that comes through training and building neural pathways. Once we understand that, it makes a lot more sense. Why are we doing this? This is why. You're building motor memory and memory skills. Physical training, such as shooting, jumping, and driving, all those things must be secondary. Why? Because you're also talking on the radio. You're also, helping to stop the bleeding. You're also making a decision about the next operation. So it is all these things that our folks have got going on at the same time in their brain. Social skills. Let's talk practical. How to remember names and positions of the people that we work with and people that we meet. That's tremendous. Dale Carnegie said 30, 40 plus years ago. Matter of fact, it's quite a bit more than that. But he said that the sweetest sound to people is the sound of their own name, the ability to remember names. Well, Howard has provided those skills necessary to prepare our special operations soldiers for the growing complexities of the operational environment, securing freedom and furthering our American values in the world. Now let's talk about new learning techniques and technology approaches. This is pretty exciting. SOF applications, again, when I say SOF, Special Operations Forces, applications of virtual reality and augmented reality technologies, right? We can use these to prepare the mind for the challenges of combat. There's been a lot of studies in education and in science and medical. We use them to prepare shooting drills without firing a real bullet. The Olympics uses them to visualize and practice and see through their activity or whatever they're going to be judged on so that they can gain perfection. So professional athletes use this. But the ability for military, we do it. Our pilots practice with trainers. Why? You're building deep neural pathways. The amazing part about the brain, it cannot tell the difference between that which is real and that which is vividly imagined. So our brain, again, I'll state it again, has unlimited potential, and our learning ability is our survivability. The ability to navigate virtually a hazardous route that we're going to drive on or fly through, to practice a conversation with a foreigner in a simulated environment, to build familiarity and expertise without deploying to the foreign country. We can practice on weapons, assembly and disassembly, medical procedures. So what are we building? Deep motor and neural memories. We can also use it to practice identification of tripwires and roadside bombs and other occupational hazards for our special operations. Why? Because we're preparing the mind and the body at the same time. Howard has given special operations the tools to be ready for anything. in the changing geopolitical environment and anything that the adversaries of freedom can throw at us. And for that, Howard, I salute you and I thank you for your contributions to national defense. Howard Berg is a real-life superhero. He has a superpower that all of us need and want. We talked about Bill Gates, that his one superpower would be speed reading. So Howard can teach you these skills, and he's made a tremendous impact in my life, and it's making and will continue to make an impact in Army Special Operations. So thank you, Howard, and Rotary team. I really appreciate this opportunity. I know I went a little bit long. Do I have any questions?
I have one. How do you grade or decide how this has really helped them? Is there any points along the way that you test them
So
after having taken the course?
absolutely, excellent question. Actually, Howard asked the same question, so you're thinking right along the same lines. And the way we'll do that is we actually have an attrition rate. Where even though they've made it through some of the complex emotional and physical challenges, there are still cognitive challenges. They have to pass tests, and we have gates and all these different steps along the way as we create the whole man, the whole woman, the whole person to be a special operator. It's that synchronization and synergy of body and mind, because that's you. That's who you are. So really it's through the testing, the grades, the evaluation. Can they learn the foreign language? What's their rating in the language? Did they pass the test? What's our rate? So there are metrics out there. But I'm interested now immediately in a shift in our culture and our change to see the necessity that every single soldier, not just in special operations, but in the Army across all the joint services needs accelerated learning and speed reading in order to really truly be ready for the challenges that our adversaries are throwing at us. So great question. Anything else?
Yeah, Sergeant Major, I have a question. Do you have manuals that have been developed for your training of your soft soldiers, and how is the speed reading? I know the speed reading, it brings speed learning, so then that's your goal. But what about the development of the manuals and things like that?
So are you talking about manuals? Just want to be clear on the question. Are you talking about manuals specifically on speed reading, how to speed read?
No, on the operations they're supposed to perform.
Training manuals.
Training, yeah.
So we've got a plethora of training manuals. The manuals are there. We actually need, that's actually a good point. The doctrine is there that tells us how to fight wars. The history books are there to tell us how a particular leader acted in a certain circumstance in preparation for D-Day, right? When they in Gallipoli and all these different, how Napoleon, was very, very successful, how America, entered into war. What lessons did we learn? What have we learned since 9/11, the 9/11 Commission? There's many lessons that we can learn. But if we're too busy working, training, deploying, without the ability to speed read, I think many of those resources are not optimized. I'll just put it that way. The guys are reading them in our PME, and I was fortunate to run the schoolhouse. They had to write reports and read through these doctrinal manuals. But how much do they retain? Do they remember it today? Will they remember it in a year? And some of this information can save their lives. We talked about the strategic impact at the ambassadorial and the national leadership level and diplomacy and local, working with local religious and spiritual leaders. How much of that have we retained? And if we don't have a super learning culture, which I'm trying to drive now, we will not be prepared for the complexities that continue to rise and are on the horizon even today.
Is there an opportunity for Howard to go to other forces, other military branches, to present this program? So we can have further speakers.
And I welcome that. I firmly welcome that. And folks that I talk to, and I've shared Howard's information with Marines. So I am Army Special Operations Command. I've shared the information with Marine Special Operations Command and with the U.S. Special Operations Command. So the information is getting out. I think not everyone quite grasps the necessity and the severity and the urgency, because our folks are smart. We give them assessment tests up front, But I say that we can do better. We can challenge them and give them the actual skills and the tools to be successful. And I believe that the defense of the nation really demands that high level of performance. But to answer your question, I've got to continue to build awareness. I'm doing this discussion and this conversation, this presentation as an awareness tool. I'm writing papers for my Special Warfare magazine to help build awareness and so that people understand the need and the necessity for Howard's not just services, but his gift, his superpower, that he can teach us the same thing. And he's done that here to a number of soldiers on Fort Bragg. It's going to make a huge impact.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
I love your enthusiasm.
I had to tone down, to be honest with you. I'm actually sitting there because I would be standing and just getting energetic. But you know what's interesting? When you have something important that you believe in, and I know just like you guys, I heard the discussions at the beginning, you are absolutely thrilled and passionate about what you do with the Rotary Club and the difference that you make, the sacrifices that you make, the lives that you get to impact. You have that same passion. I've found my passion in helping people grow, and that ties to my personal values and my personal goal, and that's to help people reach their own potential. And I say that if people aren't growing, organizations aren't growing. And John Maxwell calls it the law of the lid, that when leaders stop growing, organizations stop growing. Why? Because they're not encouraging the people. And we must continue to grow. I'm driving a new urgency because we need these accelerated learning techniques with the mountains and volumes of information. And because Google and our smartphones have hijacked our ability to think.
Well, one of the 4 pillars of Rotary is education. That's why I joined. And they do a lot of programs with young people and college students and high school students. And they have a leadership camp. So that was one of the things that was everyone joined for. I know some joined to fight polio and some joined for the water. For me, it was learning and education, and it's a big part of. So I hope you'll consider joining. I think you'd make a great addition to our club. We'd love to have you as a member.
Thank you.
And you were fun. You were really. I mean, no one could get bored listening to you.
That was very enlightening and entertaining too. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. Thank you. It was really, really inspiring. Thank you so much. I loved listening to you. I want to follow up with you too because I actually want to interview you about this. The military superpower is super learning.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you more about this. This is wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, please reach out to Howard and get my contact information.
Yes, I'll do that.
And I am retiring soon, and based off job searches and everything else, I would love to make myself available as I can to potentially, do discussions and meet with groups and talk to people and talk to leaders, whether it's a political leader, whether it's a town city mayor, whether it's a governor, because we've got to get the word out. Because again, our learning ability, I will say it boldly, is our survivability. And I'm probably saying that, and now you guys will say it, because we're just not thinking that way. The defense and the security of our nation, our STEM programs, our future economy, our future livelihood of the nation is really at stake. And we've got to prepare today. And I'm just not here, minus the work you guys are doing, which is tremendous. I'm not seeing a whole lot potentially from the national level, and that just concerns me. And I'm not going to go there because I'm still a uniformed service member, and our government's doing a great job.
I just want to add a note. I got a text from Lisa. Her computer crashed and she couldn't get it back up again.
No, I recorded this so she can watch. It was a really good one. I thought this was one of our best presenters. Yeah. Very, very exciting.
And I think it's time for our 4-way test.
Yes, we'll do that really fast. This is how we close our meetings. The 4-way test of the things we think, say, and do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And we have a fifth one. Is it fun? That's all.
I love it.
Okay. Please consider joining. I'll work with Linda to get you and Pat papers. But I think you'd make great additions. It's a great group, and when you retire from the military, it'll be a great way to do what you're looking for. Meet leaders, because people in Rotary, that's how they got to Bill Gates. Somebody in Rotary knew that Bill Gates' father was in a club in Washington, and they reached him, and he reached out to his son, and that's how Rotary got involved with Bill Gates.
Great.
It's like anyone you want to know, there's a Rotarian somewhere that's got a way to be. It's sort of like a living LinkedIn.
Well, it's a privilege to present with you folks and kind of share what's on my mind and really on my heart. And I'm proud and impressed with the work you guys are doing. And I just want to tell you, the nation's defense is in good hands. I'm proud of the men and women that serve in special operations. We only recruit, train, retain the best. So just know that the nations in our military and our armed forces are tremendous. The sacrifices our men and women do and commit every single day to lay their lives even on the line is talk about passion. You talk about belief. You talk about sacrifice. So just my hat's off again to the great men and women and to you guys for what you do to make a difference today, and it's going to last into tomorrow. So thank you.
I'll call you tomorrow. Let's talk again soon. I wanted to follow. We still want to write an article together, so I'm still interested.
Sounds good, Howard. I can't
Take
wait.
care. Thanks again, and we'll get you some papers for you and for Pat to be members. Okay, everyone, I'm going to stop. Thank you for the meeting, and look forward to seeing you all next week.
All right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Nice to meet you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.